and just want to check to see if Dr. McMullen from the Department of Health was able to make it. Don't see him yet. And then if Secretary Hurst or anyone from her team was able to join.
Hey, Wes, Dr. McMullen is on.
Okay.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I guess.
There he is. Perfect. And then Secretary Hurst or anybody from her team. I thought I saw Matt McNair join a while ago, but just want to make sure we've got the respective agencies on before we get started.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Becky Keogh. And I know I've got several of my team participating or listening in to assist as needed.
Perfect. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Well, I think we've got Matt McNair on for Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism, and we'll just go ahead and start. And well, there's Caleb. Caleb's on as well.
It's Secretary Hurst just walked by. She's getting on. She's in the process of logging in, so we can go ahead and get started. She's joining right now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, do appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. We've got a large group that's on today, and I just want to start by saying thank you to Arkansas PBS, who's broadcasting this on RKN. And also we've got Ash from the Democrat Gazette, who's also joined us today. So appreciate their participation as well. I do think just for the sake of everybody that's participating, if you can mute your microphones, that way everybody can hear everybody clearly, unless you need to speak. And then, of course, you can unmute at that point for sure. But again, thank you to everybody that was able to join us today, and we'll go ahead and get started. I know everybody's got busy schedules, but do want to start off. Hopefully everybody's got the agenda for our meeting today. First thing on there was just the BRCC 2020 annual report. And so if hopefully if you've got our email about the meeting today, you probably got that as an attachment. If you don't have a copy of that, we've got a copy on our website, the Arkansas Department of Agriculture website, that you can access there as well. And do just want to say thank you to all of our partners, Secretary Keogh, Secretary Hurst, Dr. McMullen, all of their help on that annual report. We have submitted that to the governor's office as well as to BLR to be shared with the Arkansas Legislative Council as well. So some really good information in there. Of course, 2020 was an interesting and challenging year on a lot of fronts, but from a Buffalo River Conservation Committee standpoint, I do think that we were able to get a lot accomplished and a lot achieved and a lot of really good discussions. So just appreciate everybody's participation on those fronts. Moving on, unless there are any questions or comments about the annual report, and I'll pause just for a second if there are any. Okay, well, we're here now. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda. But if there are any questions on the report, please don't hesitate to let us know. And again, we've got that accessible on the Department of Agriculture website and through the respective departments as well. So,
Secretary Ward, I just wanted to compliment your team and those that were involved in assembling that report. I know that's a monumental task to capture the work of this group, and you did it very well, and we appreciate the way it was presented. I hope the governor and the staff will find it very helpful, and the public to know the priority that's being placed on the Buffalo River watershed by not only the state agencies that are represented here today, but also the local public and federal agencies that are putting dollars behind that commitment. So appreciate all the hard work, and it was a very easy report to review and contribute to. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that. And I think that's an excellent point. And I think that's was the intent of the governor, was for it to be a cooperative effort from all of us, from the members and the subcommittee members, on our efforts as a whole, but putting together the report as well. So just appreciate everyone participated in that effort. So we'll go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda, which is just an updates from the 4 respective working group topic areas. So we'll start off with cost share programs for agriculture, and we've got Mike Mallory here with us. And so, Mike, I'll turn it over to you for an update.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Ward. Basically, the RCPP side of things has the ranking has been completed, and so the signups will start. They're trying to still figure out some financial information and get those wrapped up, and as soon as that's done, the signups will start. So it's moving right along, and I expect something to happen pretty soon on that. That's about the only thing that's new and improved. So that's all I have.
Okay. Well, appreciate that report and that update, and of course, additional information on the broader efforts there in that annual report, if anyone wants to reference that. But we'll pause for a second. If anybody has any questions for Mike or any comments on the cost share programs for agriculture and those efforts. Okay. Well, hearing none, again, just let us know if you think of any later on during the meeting or otherwise. We'll do our best to get answers and any information anyone might need on those efforts. Next item is an update on unpaved roads. And so we've got Tony Ramick here with us. And so Tony, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Secretary Ward, and good afternoon to everyone. We have agreements signed as of November 6th with both Newton County and Searcy County. And Searcy County has already requested half of their money, and the way that the unpaved roads program is going to work in this instance, we would front them half of the money, and they would not get the remainder until the project is completed. At this time, and I don't want to step on Mark Faust, but I did get some information from his team, from Melissa Trenchik, and she's a Chief Resource Stewardship and Science Interpretation and Education with PARC there, and they are continuing to work on the environmental assessment. There's still a couple of things, 2 surveys that are left to be completed. One is they're going to have to get some support from the regional staff to do an archaeological survey, and this is on Cave Mountain Road. And they expect that they should have that finalized probably in mid to late March. And also they have requested support from the Washington office for a from the Geological Resource Division to do a paleontological survey. They have found some fossils in the area, the project area, and they're tentatively scheduled to be on site in late February. They are also in consultation with the State Historic Preservation Officer and tribal partners. So that's already occurring. They have consulted with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife about some tree removal and ground disturbance, and we have an okay to go ahead and remove trees in the project area for safety reasons or line of sight. It needs to happen before April the 10th. And then there's some other contingencies here that they have put on. They want to stop work 30 minutes before dusk. And then if there's going to have to be any blasting or anything, stumps or whatever, they don't want it to happen within a half a mile of the cave to disturb the cave. But things are progressing and moving forward. And we're thankful for that. And I think that we're probably a little ahead of schedule, all things being considered. And they say when the environmental assessment is complete and with an expected approval or signature and no significant finding, the rest of the project can move forward. But those 2 surveys are going to have to be completed before we can move any further. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tony. Appreciate all your work and continued efforts on unpaved roads, not just in Buffalo River watershed, but across the state. It's incredibly important program. So appreciate all that you're doing on those efforts.
Barry, I'm on a call too.
So next we'll go to water and wastewater system infrastructure, and we'll turn it over to, I see Debbie Dixon's with us. We'll turn it over to you.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, sure can.
I hope there's not too much background noise. My husband's in the other room on a call as well. So update on Jasper. Jasper is moving forward with the design of the pump station to eliminate the I&I infiltration and inflow. And we expect this project to bid in late spring to early summer to meet their requirements. And that's pretty much where we're at. They're moving forward. Things seem to be moving along fairly well.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Debbie or any of the efforts on water and wastewater infrastructure? Okay, well, hearing none, we'll go to our last topic area, which is tourism and tourism impacts. And so I'll turn it over to Secretary Hurst or anyone from her team for a quick update on that end.
Thank you, Secretary Ward. I don't have anything specific to report today. I did want to ask if Matt McNair is on the line. I think he was making some trips up to help with some water quality investigation. He may not have joined us. We have not met as a committee, but so I really don't have anything to report. We are planning to meet here in the next few weeks or months. We've been very tied up getting the business interruption grant out to the hospitality industry. I'm sure money went into the Buffalo River watershed area, which was a great relief to businesses that are really struggling during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Harris. Appreciate that update and appreciate, just like Tony with Unpaved Roads, appreciate all that you do and your team throughout the state. So we'll go next. Our next item for the agenda is BRCC funding application presentations. And so just a quick background on that, with the BRCC efforts, with the $1 million that was allocated for this project and for these efforts, there's about $167,421 left. And so when we last met in November, there was discussion about opening up an application process to allow further applications that were looking for funding assistance on some efforts within the Buffalo River watershed. So we put out a press release on November 9th with an application period running through December 15th. And through December 15th, we received 10 applications for funding. And hopefully everybody on the email that's participating today got a very brief summary of those proposals, but that's was included in the email that we had sent out for the meeting. And so what we decided to do was just have, because we just provided a very brief summary on those proposals, was to have each of the applicants provide a presentation or a summary of what they were doing and give more in-depth information of their proposals. And then to take any questions that anyone may have on those as well. So I do think we're sitting really good on time at this point. It's only about 1:15 now. So we'll probably just go ahead and ask that the presentations be limited to about 5 minutes or less. And then we can go into any questions and answers on any of those just for the sake of being mindful of everybody's time. So the first one that we have on the list is Billy Justice from U.S. Geological Survey. So Billy, I think I did see you just a minute ago, and I will turn it over to you.
Okay.
I'm sorry. This is Senator Missy Urban.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I say one thing? I'm sorry. Before we start the presentation, can I just say one thing? I'm traveling. I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of those folks that gave us reports from the subcommittee, and I just want to thank everybody for their work on this, and look forward to continuing to work with everyone. So I'm so grateful. I just want you to know, and on behalf of the people, that I represent, Searcy County and that whole area, a little bit of Marion too, but the Buffalo River watershed area, Stone, and everyone, Baxter, we're just really grateful, and I think this has been a great example of great coordination and collaboration. And so of a lot of different entities, pulling in the same direction. So really grateful. And I just want to say that in case I lose everybody. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we very much appreciate that and very much appreciate all of your leadership and legislative members that are participating with the BRCC, yourself, Representative Slade, Representative Fortner, and Senator Davis as well. So just do appreciate all of your continued leadership and help on these efforts. So we'll go now to Mr. Justice. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Secretary Ward. Can everyone hear me and hopefully be able to see my screen in just a minute? Can everyone see the screen? Okay, good deal. So my name is Billy Justice. For those of you that I haven't met, I work with the USGS Lower Mississippi Gulf Water Science Center out of the Little Rock office. I want to talk to you about briefly about filamentous algae. I have several slides, but I wasn't aware of the 5-minute limit, but I'll try to skip through some of them. So if I skip slides, it'll be intentional, hopefully. Whoops, let's see. All right, so the recent history and the way the filamentous algae project got started was blooms that began, were first came to public attention in 2016. In that year, there was about 25 river miles that the Arkansas Division of Environmental Quality considered to have a bloom. The next year, that area tripled to 2017, or to about 75 river miles. And in 2018, it was extended about 90 river miles. So at that point, there was quite a bit of concern about filamentous algae. In 2018, Arkansas Game and Fish approached USGS with the request to begin a filamentous algae project, largely because the blooms were impairing fishing. That was a concern to them. The project was continued in 2019 with cooperator ADQ. So we had, together with USGS federal dollars, we had a $60,000 project in 2019, and that was later extended with through the Division of Environmental Quality and the BRAC group, and that funding gave us enough to get to this point. We have enough funding to collect another sample or two. The current request of 220 Cali would get us 2 more years of data in the or 2 more growing seasons of data, which is pretty important. Filamentous algae occur, or they begin to be develop in June and usually start waning in October. You know, the public, a lot of things have changed on the filament on the Buffalo River, and this is the reason for the justification for the study. We have, you know, thousands of people visiting every year now. Many of them don't just look at the river, they get in the river, they camp on gravel bars. At the same time, you know, we've had a changing land use. Just as an example, and not to point a finger, but our agriculture service records indicate between 2012 and 2017, poultry production in Newton and Searcy counties increased by about 35, or those farms, number of farms increased by about 35%. So water quality could be declining over extended time, and these biological responses are a way to keep our finger on that pulse that is aesthetically and economically important. I'm sorry, I keep hitting the wrong buttons. So we began the project in July 2018, and we sampled in October of 2020. That was our last sample. We've done that with help from Buffalo National River, the Arkansas Game and Fish, ADQ, and Arkansas Division of State Parks. Secretary Hurst mentioned Matt McNair had been making trips. So there's been a lot of personnel that have been helping out with the project, and it's been a pretty extensive effort. In addition to getting water quality samples, we estimate filamenous algae coverage on a 500-meter reach. I don't really get into details for how we do that, but that takes a considerable amount of time at each main stem site. We know that it's forming largely around where groundwater is coming into the Buffalo River, especially at the toe edges of gravel bars. We've installed wells on the gravel bars to try to help us get a handle for that. And more prominently, it forms around springs. And the biggest example of that is around Margaret White Springs. If you have never been there, it's a very remote place, a great place to visit. The Buffalo River in base flow periods essentially goes underground and resurfaces more like a lake, where it's just a large spring-fed lake. And that's a prime example, but there's also springs along the river. Any time we see cold water coming in or iron leaching on the bank, we can see in the early part of the growing season filamentous algae associated with it. At this point, we've got 25 sites where we're collecting data on a 6-week rotation. There's 12 main stem sites and six of these shallow wells and 6 springs. We call them springs. Margaret White is actually in the middle of the river, but a lot of them most of them are tributaries that are coming in that are very cold. So they're creeks that are spring fed in a short distance above confluence. Looking at a little bit of nitrate and organophosphate data, the main stem column on the left, the pink box plots are main stem data, and the green box plots are spring data, and the blue box plots are piezometers. So you can see the springs are contributing quite a bit of nutrients to the Buffalo River. These springs also have a different water quality. They have more hardness, which comes from calcium. It's dissolved lime. And so we know when we add lime in an agricultural situation that it really promotes the uptake of nutrients. So these spring-fed areas are kind of primed for nutrient enrichment. This is some filamentous algae coverage data. This is an example of the data that we're getting. This data is actually from 2018. In 2019, we found out how important hydrology can be. We had frequent floods. It was a wet summer. These filaments are very fragile. They'll come up through the water column and can be several feet in length, but when you have high velocities associated with storms, it'll shear them off. You can still see it on the rocks when you pick them up, but it's not evident when you're floating down the river. In 2020, if you can see the photo over to the left, can you see that photo? It's Margaret White Springs. That's a typical situation, base flow at a Margaret White Spring. I took that this year, and you just see filamentous algae growing over. There's actually macrophytes that it's growing over in that point. So that's an extreme. But so these springs, again, Margaret White Spring is a problem area. Downstream of Gilbert, there's a section there down to Rocky Creek, which is maybe 10 river miles, I'm guessing, upstream of Harriet is another problem area. So that's my presentation. I want to acknowledge again all the personnel and the monetary contributions that these other agencies have made to the project thus far. If you have time for questions, I'll be glad to answer them the best I can. Thank you.
And well, thank you, Mr. Justice. Appreciate that presentation. And we will open it up for any questions that anyone may have, but just want to, as far as the funding aspect of it, just want to make sure that we're capturing that correctly. So looking for $132,000 for a study that would continue until September of 2022. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, Mr. Secretary, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned this would fund 2 years of continued research. Is there something, I mean, why 2 years? Is that the amount of time needed? Will the study be complete at that time?
Well, that's the amount of time that would give us 5 years of data collection. And some years, you know, we designed the study to the best that we could, but we found out that it's very hard to estimate the filamentous algae in some years. And so when we have those years where we have frequent flooding in the growing season, we're not getting as much data on the coverage. So the 2 years of additional study will give us 5 years of data, which we feel is a minimum that we need to do, you know, this along to what we consider to do more long-term effort than what we normally do. Most of our studies are 1 to 2 years in duration, but just because of the hydrology variability, this one would be longer.
So is it fair to say, in a very unscientific way, that right now you have a hunch about what's going on, you have a good idea, but after an additional 2 years of study, you can draw some conclusions?
Yes, ma'am. And, you know, there's a, you know, if there was a you know, half that amount of funding, or I'm not looking at the budget obviously, but you know, if we had additional, right now we're out of funding and we will not be able to, you know, we're saving what funding we have left to hopefully get some data in the growing season if we don't get any more funding. So we're hopeful, you know, that any additional, another year growing season data would be beneficial to the project.
Yeah, and a question on that end, you know, if it's 1 more year, would that be just as simple as splitting that $132,000 number in half and funding it for a year that way, or is it different variables than that?
I'd have to look at the budget. So that's funding through, I think I said September of 2022. So it would probably be something close to half. But,
okay.
I have a question, Secretary Ward.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess to your point and to Secretary Hurst's point, I think it is important that we encourage data collection. I know DEQ has supported some of the early years on this project and continue to look for resources to continue our relationships with USGS. So, but to that point, I know there's other proposals before us today too. So I guess I would ask if, is there other funding sources that we can perhaps assist in that you might be able to leverage if a grant's provided to you today or through this organization? Do you believe that might help you leverage some additional funding sources if you need additional year, or if we can only do portion of this, or if we do additional, if you need additional years to get to final decisions?
Secretary Keel, DQ has funded in the past. So that's another, your agency directly has provided some funding. We're constantly looking for opportunities. We'll do multiple proposals probably and looking for any available funding, but we don't have anything that we could say would allow us to continue for sure.
And Secretary Ward, I believe some of the funding we utilized was some federal funds that were provided, I believe, to our agency, but also I believe Department of Ag and other health may receive what they call multi-purpose grants from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And we allocated a certain amount of that in those early years as we started. So, and we understand that appropriation has been advanced, for this coming federal fiscal year. So we would be interested, we could explore, those applications to EPA and see if they would approve a continuing support there as well. So just throw that out there. I don't have money in the bank or a commitment of a grant, but, and I believe your agencies and the 4 agencies on here may all receive some portion of that multi-purpose grant for different priorities that you might want to advance. So I don't know if that would be something the health department would consider, or your Department of Ag could consider as well, allocating even a small percentage of that money to continue our effort here. So just throwing out ideas if we're unable to fully fund this initiative, and it's important to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, the health department, we've participated in such things before. I don't see why that we couldn't try again. Maybe, this is a good, I don't want to jump ahead because there's other people that want to make presentations, but there's a lot of people that swim in that river. So.
Well, and I'll add, I don't want to jump ahead either, but this seems like a very important study that certainly needs to continue. Seems like it is the sort of data that is needed to guide efforts to protect the water quality, which is our mission. So I've enjoyed hearing about that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
I absolutely appreciate that presentation and the discussion there. And so since we do have a few others that are going to be presenting as well, I think we'll wait till the end of those for voting on the actual funding allocations themselves. But some really good points have been made so far, so appreciate that. And one other thing we may try to do, Mr. Justice, we may, I know you had a note on those slides that not for citation, but that may be of interest if those slides are shareable for others to take a look at, just to have for reference as well.
Before I can formally share, I have to go through a review process, but I can do that with no problem.
Okay. Yes, sir. Well, we appreciate that. So next, the next one on our agenda is Mayor Larson from the City of Jasper. So Mayor, we'll turn it over to you if you're ready.
I am ready. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. I am Jan Larson. I'm the mayor of the City of Jasper. And we're all here, as we know, because the Buffalo National River is our treasure. And for the people who live here, no matter who we are or what we do, we love our river. And in Jasper, tourism is the lifeblood for our economy. And our tourists are coming. They love our area, the floating, the hiking, the waterfalls, everything. And we believe part of it too is our little historic town of Jasper. We do hope we're contributing to that. We think it is so important that as stakeholders, we all must work together to manage tourism. Without positive management, I truly believe the river as we know it could quickly be destroyed. With 2 million visitors projected in the near future, we've got to act now. And again, I want to thank the BRCC committee for doing this and for working with all of us in the watershed who need help. Jasper is small. We have 500 residents Yet a highway department showed a daily average of 6,800 cars crossing the Little Buffalo River Bridge into historic downtown Jasper in 2019. That's up from 5,200 or 1,600 increase from 2017. And they're coming here because of our river, our natural beauty, the hiking, camping. It's just a highly sought after area for visitors and tourists right now. And these tourists need services. They need places to stay, eat, activities during downtime. And it is going to be extremely hard for areas like ours to serve them with our current infrastructure. We must provide the needed services while keeping our natural beauty, the very essence of why they're coming in the first place. So and as part of that, we must have restrooms. And the city is proposing, because we have no public restrooms, we're proposing to buy the Buffalo Theater here on the Jasper Square, which will house public bathrooms and an information center. This is located in the Jasper Commercial Historic District, which was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2010. This building was built in 1916 with locally quarried stone. Its 1,900 square foot building has been empty since 2015. A performing arts group tried to start a program there, which failed. The theater bought the building for $125,000 and did $25,000 in repairs. Don Nelms, a local businessman, bought the building out of foreclosure from the Bank of the Ozarks for $85,000. He put on a new roof on this building, and that was a flat roof. That's an expensive roof to do on this type of building, and did some other work. He will sell the building to the city of Jasper for what he has in it, which is $120,000. We believe that we can have the bathrooms operable by spring. However, we will apply for a historic preservation grant with help from the Economic Development District in Harrison. Tina Cole has written several of these grants, and we've talked with her. We will do ADA accessible bathrooms, and that will help us preserve this building. We want to bring it back to life. Again, we will provide the ADA public restrooms for residents and tourists. And to help defray the operating cost, there will be space here for the bathrooms and the information center to possibly have vendors or services in that building that will support tourism. This grant will make it possible to provide the needed services for residents and tourists, and will restore and save a historic building. We would appreciate your considering this building, this project. And thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mayor Larson. We'll open it up for any questions that anyone may have. Okay. Well, here are no additional questions at the moment. We'll go on to the next presentation, but do want to just say thank you, Mayor, for all of your work and all that you're doing to advance the city of Jasper, but the broader impacts that has for the whole Buffalo River and the watershed region itself. So thank you very much for that and for your proposal. So we'll go next to Mr. Robert Bird. I hope that he was able to join us from USDA APHIS Wildlife Services. I'm not sure if he joined or not. I do know we have JP Fairhead was also with us earlier, if JP's still on, but I'll turn it over to either of you if you're with us.
Yeah, I'm here. This is Robert. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thanks, Robert. Yeah, we got you.
All right. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. But anyway, I think y'all can hear me. But yeah, my name is Robert Bird. I'm state director for an agency in the U.S. Department of Agriculture called Wildlife Services. Those that are not familiar with us, that we provide federal leadership when it comes to wildlife damage management, anywhere wildlife's causing damage. And in Arkansas, feral swine, feral hogs, whatever you want to call them, is a major issue, not only in the Buffalo River, but statewide. So we do a lot of work with feral swine throughout the state. And why are they a problem? Just to read a little bit from the proposal, but these are non-native invasive species. They're not natural wildlife. They're not supposed to be in Arkansas, but they cause a lot of damage. Excuse me, they're opportunistic, easy for me to say, omnivores, known to consume almost any organic material, really anything with a calorie in it, they're going to eat. They impact plants, animals through direct consumption, habitat modification, degradation, and competition. Their rooting activity leads to bank erosion and the soil disturbance resulting from trampling, wallowing, and rooting activity that can increase the propagation of many invasive plant species. Habitat damage by feral swine can be pronounced in wet environments where rare communities, habitat types, and soils may be more sensitive to disturbance. Swine activity in these habitats has contributed to declines in water quality and aquatic organisms. They estimate, these are estimates, that feral swine cause an estimated $1.5 billion in damage nationwide, and $19 million in Arkansas. And I believe both of those are on the low end. They're very conservative estimates. Feral swine was also addressed in the Buffalo River Watershed Base Management Plan, and identified their rooting and wallowing, destroying pastures, sensitive natural areas, habitats, including glades, marshes, springs, and cause erosions that affects water quality. So what the basis of this proposal is so I have trappers in certain parts of the state already. This funding, if anything is available, would help expand that footprint. So up in the Buffalo River watershed area, I do have a couple trappers that are working mainly in Boone and Marion County and some in Stone County. But a lot of the other areas throughout the watershed, we don't really have a presence. So this funding would be used to help landowners, whoever has feral swine damage, that we would be able to provide direct assistance in helping manage feral swine damage throughout the watershed. This is a big problem. We're always looking for partners and folks that can help with this. My presentation is short and sweet, but there is a problem with feral swine, and I appreciate the time today and any assistance we can get with this issue.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that presentation and kind of a point of clarification for all of us, just on the funding request itself. So that one's looking for about $100,000, but essentially that's, you mentioned you've already got work going on within the watershed itself. So it's essentially a match to some of the ongoing efforts that USDA Wildlife Services already performing.
Yes, we're already expending, I get a budget for feral swine work in Arkansas, but it's not enough to cover the entire state, obviously, or I'd already be doing that. We're doing work where we can with the resources we have. This would help offset that, and it would open the door for us to provide services in areas that we're not current.
Mr. Secretary, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do your efforts complement the efforts of the state's task force?
Sure. We're part of the task force. We work very closely with JP, Wes, and all the other ones on the task force. We partner with, Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Ag, AGFC, you name it. We're all in this together. So
how are you all working together in this area specifically within the watershed?
Well, Wildlife Services is, like I said, we're doing some with, like I said, Marion, Baxter, Stone County, and some of that is involved with the Farm Bill pilot projects, if you're familiar with those, and those are specific to in this area, Marion, Baxter, Izard counties. So we're working with the county conservation districts and JP with the Department of Ag to specifically address feral swine in those areas. And this would help expand that out a little bit.
One item I would throw out is an important role they play is with our NRCS funding. We can't actually physically kill the hogs. That's a role they can play, but the federal government says we can't use the NRCS funds to do that. We can trap them, we can do everything else, but the actual killing of the hogs has to be done by APHIS or by the landowner.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm trying to understand, because I know there are a lot of partners working on this issue, and I want to know what $100,000 is going to do for the watershed specifically, because that's our job. So, do you have a budget breakdown, and that's something that we could see that would show us how it addresses the issue within the watershed?
Sure, it would mainly go to direct salary for trapping technicians. It would go towards equipment. It would go towards corn, all the stuff you need, vehicles, gas, all you name it, to address feral swine. But it would be actual assistance to landowners with feral swine problems. It's not a trap loan. It's not, anything like that. It's actually physically doing the work.
So you essentially contract out with private landowners?
No, ma'am. It would be done by Wildlife Services, USDA employees doing the work. And it's going to be more of a cost share with the funds and the employees I already have.
Of the scope of your work, you mentioned sampling, and I guess I was just wondering, is that around pathogens, I guess concerns about impact to water quality? Is that a water quality sampling effort as part of the, or soil I mean, if I read your proposal, it indicated you were taking, I don't know if that was the sample of the hogs themselves, or can you explain the sampling aspect of that proposal?
Sure. The sampling aspect. So like I said, Wildlife Services, wildlife damage management is what we do. So part of that are diseases, especially those associated with any zoonotic diseases, those that can impact either humans or even those that can impact, commercial operations, So we test a certain percentage of the feral swine that we capture in the state. Send those off for several diseases, mainly pseudorabies, swine brucellosis, classical swine fever, influenza, stuff like that. Those are the samples that I'm talking about. There won't be any direct water quality samples at this point, but mainly sampling the animals that we remove.
Okay, any other questions for Robert on the feral hog proposal?
This is Ben Melbourne. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
With these funds, how do you plan on tracking the expense of the funds that come directly from this committee, and can you guarantee that those funds are going to be spent within the Buffalo watershed region and not spent outside of that region in watersheds on the White River and other rivers that are impacted by the buffalo, but aren't necessarily in that exact watershed that is going to cause the water quality issues. And that'd be my biggest deal. I've trapped hogs here. I mean, Christmas Eve we caught 48 right in the watershed of the Buffalo River down at Baker Ford, and then they're in Silver Hill. So the Game and Fish brought their trap and set it up, and came and trapped the hogs, euthanized the hogs, hauled the hogs off. Out, and it was all on my property. So my question is, how's the Wildlife Service going to come in and replace what the Game and Fish is doing that's not costing us any money at this point, where our money could be going to other issues like the algae and things like that seem to me to be a bigger priority. And another note to that is, we talk about invasive species and the hogs being a non-native species, but the Rocky Mountain elk is not a native species either. And so, we're opening up a can of worms if we start talking about non-native species on the buffalo, because that is already an issue with farming and farmers. And in my opinion, water quality, when they're a big heavy animal going up and down the banks that can cause some erosion issues. So my question is how we're going to track that expenditure and what advantage we're going to get over what the Game and Fish is already doing and spending. Does that make sense to y'all?
Sure. I'm not talking about, replacing what AGFC is doing. We work hand in hand with them and would going forward, but the demand for feral swine trapping has exceeded what AGFC can do. It's exceeded what we can do. We're hopefully working together. So how do you track to make sure it's in the watershed? Is we use a GIS based collection tool for all of our data entry. So I can tell you exactly, down with GPS coordinates, exactly where those hogs were caught. That's how we track what we're doing, where we're doing it. So I can tell you exactly what came out of the watershed under these dollars. So I don't see that as being an issue.
My biggest concern is that the money is spent outside of the watershed. I mean, if I could see we get some money and we get the effect in the watershed in the region, helping the people that are within the Buffalo National River, I can understand that. My fear is that it's going to go outside of that. Where it gets to Boone County on the Crooked Creek, or it gets to Marion County and Baxter County on the White River, or other tributaries that don't necessarily flow into the river, the Buffalo National River. So just the checks and balances on that to make sure the money is used and appropriated in the right area is my biggest concern with that. Because it's easy to put fuel in a truck and then not track the mileage, and half that fuel be spent somewhere else, and those are my concerns around it, is that there's a percent loss that's not impacting the buffalo where it could be.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to put all your concerns to rest. I mean, all I can tell you is we have a GPS location on all of our traps. We track expenses. We have multiple cooperators that we do this on, and expenses are tracked down to the hour and partial gas receipts. We can certainly provide a report when this is all said and done at the end to see what was spent where, and then again, this is a cost share. I'm splitting, the more than half for this. So that's what I like to do, is leverage money that I already have with other cooperators, so I can turn $1 into $2. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure how you can get around some of that, maybe to get all your concerns put to bed, but we track it down to GPS coordinates and itemized receipts. So I'm pretty comfortable that this money is going to be used where I say it's going to be used.
Would you be able to like identify today how much money is being utilized by your agency or by your current workload in the watershed as a baseline? If money is provided to you, would you have the baseline and then be able to show the increased level of eradication in the watershed as a result of this additional grant? That would be the question I guess I would have is, do you know it right now about how much money you're spending in the watershed on an annual basis?
No, because the watershed's never been a boundary before.
Right.
Now
But
it
you
would
said
be
the two
with this one.
counties. You mentioned you had work going on in 2 of the counties. So you have that number, I guess, of what you spend in those counties, I guess. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. I could tell you how much I'm spending in Marion, Baxter, and Izard County. You know, I've got 3 employees up there. That's probably pushing $300,000 annually. But you know, the watershed doesn't take up the whole county on any of those. So breaking it down, how much is in this particular watershed, I could, but it would take some time. But the how we generally manage or determine success, there's several methods. Primarily is damage data. So we'll work with the landowner. How much damage did you have before we removed the pigs? How much did you have after? That's really one of the key messages that we use to track success. Number of pigs removed is not a big measure of success because a few pigs can cause a lot of damage. But if you can quantify dollar value, these pigs caused X amount of dollars in damage. Last year, we went in, we did some trapping. This is how much damage there is, if any, this year. That's typically how we measure success or failure.
Okay, well, any other questions for Robert? Okay, well, appreciate that, Robert. Appreciate that presentation, and do very much appreciate all the work that y'all do on feral hog efforts across the state and portion of the Buffalo River already. So appreciate that. And we'll go on to our next presentation, which is from Mr. Daryl Treat from the Greater Searcy County Chamber of Commerce.
Hello, it's Daryl, and I would just say that first off, I felt like I was encouraged to make a submission. However, I would tell you that I'm not contentious at all about this. If the committee doesn't see fit for our proposal, that's totally okay. You know, the proposal was to receive a bit of money to buy some trees to plant, but I think we can press ahead with our own resources and go ahead and plant some trees regardless. So I'm just not too contentious over this. In fact, I'm not at all. So it's totally up to what you all want to do.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And I do know that you've had Joe Fox just sent me a message that he was having to get off here, but I know that our folks, Joe and I think Mike Mallory was part of those conversations as well, just on some efforts that we can do with our Bauckham Nursery. But Mike, if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, if I could, I did kind of make a counter offer to Mr. Treat of possibly $2,500 for large tree purchase, and then we of course we have a nursery and we can pot some trees. He was talking about the other side of that was to provide some trees to homeowners throughout Marshall or Searcy County. I don't know how widespread he was talking about, but if we could pot a couple of hundred trees, a variety of species, and provide that at no cost, and cut his proposal in half, basically, it would allow him, you know, a good sized tree, maybe $125. So you're looking at possibly 20 trees, and in the area that he was talking about, that would that would be a pretty good start anyway. He's talking about a city park there, a little lake that they just recently completed in the old Berry Shed area. But yeah, we'd be glad to work with him and provide him some guidance. We have our urban foresters that would like to make a plan for him and, you know, give some suggestions on species and planting sites and that kind of thing.
Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Anybody have any questions on any of that?
I do have, I guess, a comment and a question. You know, Mr. Treat, you know, I love the idea. I mean, one of the best, most effective ways to affect water quality is planting trees. So it's a good thing. I guess the question was, what species did you have in mind? And I guess maybe that hasn't been determined yet.
No, I will say that we started a tree planting effort at the old Berry Shed property owned by Searcy County. We wanted to kind of make a statement there with sugar maples, and we planted quite a few of them already. But with tree plantings, oftentimes there are reasons that your trees don't survive. And so we have to come back in and replant there. And the same thing over at the city park, we made an effort to plant some trees over there. Some of the soil there was really, really poor soil, heavy clay, and it just didn't work out for the most part. But what we're looking to do is, you know, when people come to the Ozarks in the fall, they want to see beautiful fall colors, and there's nothing better than a sugar maple. And we have a lot of good sugar maples here in Searcy County, and they're stunning trees, or certainly they can be. And also we like the spring flowering trees of dogwoods and redbuds, natives. Of course, the sugar maple's native here as well. And so we just like those trees that enhance the beauty of our county, all season beauty. I mean, all trees are great, but there are some trees that just don't have the autumn beauty or the spring beauty of others.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions regarding that proposal? See, Mr. Scott Simon. Yes, sir.
Hey, Mr. Secretary. We'd be happy to match the Forestry Division's contribution, so we could contribute to that, Daryl, and offer $2,500 for your trees. Be happy to.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that input and that offer.
Thanks so much, Scott. That is really generous. We really appreciate you.
Idea. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments on that one? Okay, well, hearing none, we'll go to the last presentation. So we've got Amit from University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, who's got a proposal. And so Amit, we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you. I hope everyone is able to hear me. So let me first briefly introduce myself. So I'm Amit Sinha. Currently, I'm working as an assistant professor at University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. And my expertise revolves very much around the water quality, fisheries, and the aquaculture. So let me briefly explain the motivation that led me to, submit my so-called pre-proposal for BRCC. So the first motivation is basically the problem that we are facing pretty much within our own county, like in the Lono County, in the Jefferson County, is about the algal bloom. And pretty much I received the call, like, how should we control those algal bloom? So that was first motivation. Second is, in 2018, I received a very small grant from USGS where I intend to see how we can control the algal bloom, especially the cyanobacterial bloom, using the algaecide. So that was two of my motivation why I threw up my idea for this BRCC grant. So the problem, when I received this grant from USGS, the money was not enough to conduct all the things what I planned. So basically I focused on the algaecide, the application of algaecide. But the problem with the algaecide, is like, it's not very much targeted, meaning that it can also affect the very much beneficial blue-green algae if the dose is not correct. So those are the things that led me to pitch up the idea for this proposal, where I intend to give the title as the eco-friendly strategies to control harmful algal bloom for enhancing the food sustainability and the recreational value. So let me briefly introduce all of you to kind of like algal bloom. I'm pretty sure everyone know about this, but I think it would be nice, if I just go through briefly. So we all know that the cyanobacterial harmful blooms have been pretty much increasingly and are well reported in the last 5 to 10 years, and has become a very wide water quality issues across the United States, including the Buffalo River water bodies. At the same time, what happened is like this kind of algal bloom is very much favored when there is a high nutrient load, perhaps because of the anthropogenic activities, the human activities. And another important factor that I believe most of the time the scientists overlook is the presence of low nitrogen and high phosphorus ratio, which actually fuel up or facilitate the growth of harmful algal bloom. In addition to all those things, definitely like low rates of vertical mixing, the warm water temperature all help in having a high algal bloom. And what is more interestingly, typically among the cyanobacteria is that this cyanobacteria, we also called as harmful algal bloom, have the ability to fix nitrogen in the water because, like they have a special apparatus that called heterocyst. And because of this special characteristic of fixing the nitrogen in the water, this things allows the cyanobacteria to competitively exclude other beneficial phytoplankton when there is less when the nitrogen is limiting factor. So meaning that definitely the cyanobacteria have a better way to get flourish in the water even when there is less nitrogen present. So apart from all those problems that the cyanobacteria or the algal blooms brings to the aquatic resources, including the fish, where it can increase the turbidity of the water, that reduces the overall aesthetic value. It reduces the tourism value because the water doesn't look clean. And on top of that, definitely the cyanobacteria also forms the toxins like hepatotoxin, neurotoxin, cyanotoxins. And definitely like this kind of toxin can lead to the mass mortality of fish. And it's not only about the fish, but can seriously damage the wildlife, livestock, and like the humans. At the same time, the domestic pets or maybe the wildlife, they are also pretty much exposed to the cyanotoxin through the water that they consumed unintentionally. And by that, the livestock can themselves become pretty much a route for human exposure, because sometimes we also hunt those animals, for our own need, like for the meat, and even, like sometimes if we have the domestic animal, like we rely them on the dairy products. So I think it is pretty much clear that the cyanobacteria bloom threaten the use and the sustainability of the river system, and pretty much also on the Buffalo River freshwater resources. So what I believe, like we must come up with the idea how to reduce those cyanobacteria, basically targeting the cyanobacteria, but not hampering the beneficial green algae, because those beneficial green algae perhaps leads to the higher primary productivity that actually help in sustaining the fisheries resources. So what I'm actually proposing here, like instead of using the algae side, we should, instead of trying the algae side like copper sulfate alum, like people have been using, even I used in my previous experiment. And what I found is like, though the algae side can definitely control the algal bloom, but they are not very much targeted. So meaning that they can not only kill the cyanobacterial bloom, but at the same time, the algae side can also reduce the population of beneficial green algae. So what I'm trying to propose here is that instead of going to the algae side, why don't we try to lower the nutrient, typically the phosphorus. By doing that, what we do is we increase the total nitrogen and phosphorus ratio in the water. That will help the green algae to grow, but at the same time will also limit the production of cyanobacteria. And if the cyanobacteria population is reduced, definitely there will be not much production of those kind of cyanotoxins. So utilizing this research idea, we can very much utilize the aspects of nutrient manipulation of changing the total nitrogen and the phosphorus ratio and shift the dominancy of the phytoplankton or the plankton more towards the beneficial green algae like diatom and flagellate. So what I propose is that instead of going to algae side, we can try some kind of phosphorus binding clay. I know in the market there are some commercial product called Phoslock is available. I have not tried. That's why I want to utilize this platform to try those kind of product where it can chelate the phosphorus and then can reduce typically the cyanobacterial bloom, but at the same time should also facilitate the growth of beneficial green algae, and which can increase the primary productivity and thereby the fisheries sustainability. So that's all I have from my side. So if you have any question, please let me know. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Amit. I appreciate that. I appreciate your presentation, and we'll open it up for any questions anyone may have.
Oh, I have a question. And is it Dr. Sinha? Am
Yes,
I pronouncing that right? Was that a pretty weak attempt?
Mm-hmm.
So we know that the algae is there, but how do you know that adding whatever you want to add isn't harmful to the water? I guess is my question. Upon what data do you rely to know how to safely reduce the phosphorus level?
Sorry, you were cut for a particular time. So could you repeat your question again? I'm sorry, there was the connection was not very good, so I didn't hear you correctly.
I'm curious. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, now it's better. Yeah.
Yeah. How you know how to safely address. You mentioned reducing the phosphorus ratio,
right,
and mentioned some approaches that cause detriment to the other algae that is good and healthy to be there. But how do you know, based on what data, how do you know how to approach it? Because maybe that data exists, but it worries me a little bit that it might be an experiment. So can you help me understand that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think that's a very great question. So, when I have run a previous kind of experiment here, we also have a reference pond, or let's say reference water bodies, where we kind of monitor the soluble reactive phosphorus and the total phosphorus. And then we know what is the, let's say, basal value of the phosphorus that can still facilitate, the green algae, but when it goes further, it might, so we have that kind of range of the phosphorus, what we call as the reference phosphorus value, and that can change, that can actually shift the plankton community. So I don't have the value in my mind, I don't remember the value at this point, but I might go back and have a look. But definitely, like we do those kind of like phosphorus quantification, and we have a reference value.
Yeah, so I guess kind of one of my thoughts is kind of related. Have you demonstrated this on a smaller scale? And it sounds like you have.
Yes, definitely. Like we have some in our facilities. We have a outdoor small pond, like 0.1 acre. I have tried those ones there, but I have never tried in the natural fisheries because I'm mainly from aquaculture field.
So I'm going to share a story with a private, someone has a little resort with a pond or whatever you want to call it. He called it a lake, but an algal problem where he, started implementing treatments to try to control stuff. And of course, he stimulated, release of toxins. So we ended up with someone with adverse effects. So, I'd like to, in your smaller scale, maybe see what your treatments do to actual, toxin levels. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Before
Definitely.
we jumped out into the buffalo.
Yeah, we have done that experiment before, but that's what I said. Like I have used the algae side, and we have also tested, like that time we have a huge population of Plantothrix. And then the toxin, we also quantify the toxin by using, I think the kit was by Abraxas. And we found that algicide was able to reduce also the toxins. I think it was, I can't remember the name of that, the whole thing. So I ran the experiment in 2 phases. So in the first phase, we had a high bloom of Plantothrix. Second time, we found a lot of microcystis. So, and then we quantified the microcystin. And algicide, on one hand, of course, like it was able to destroy the microsystem, but it was not very much targeted, meaning that we start getting a very low amount of green algae too. So, I mean, on one hand, it's kind of like a compromise what you want.
Yeah.
I hope I was able to answer your question.
I think there could be another question here as well.
Sure.
Maybe it functions on a small scale, but even at a larger scale, you know, I think that there's we've got issues with sustainability. You know, let's say that whatever you could introduce into the water, and I'm not too sure that Park Service or anyone else is going to let you do that, but even if it was functional, what type of sustainability and what type of resources would it take to maintain that? It sounds like, and forgive me if you've already looked at this, but there's other funding mechanisms. There's a program, a 104B program that the university, Dr. Brian Haggard manages. And that may be more suited for what you're trying to do to ramp up the scale before we get to a river scale, certainly. And that would probably answer some more questions.
Yeah.
But I can't speak for the BRCC committee. I'm just on a subcommittee, but I would think that that may be more plausible to solicit funding from them and to try to do some additional research. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Tony,
you.
who was that you're recommending? Who was that partnership?
It's at the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, at the Arkansas Water Resources Center.
Okay.
And the guy that runs that is Dr. Brian Haggard. And we've worked quite a bit with him, and he's well known in water quality monitoring, in-stream water quality chemistry. So
I think I have seen those advertisements. The problem is the match. They need $1. You put you have to put $2 for each $1. So the match is pretty high for that 104B Arkansas Water funding agency. So anyway, like it's a very good suggestion. I will again go back and have a look how I can fit there. But,
well,
yeah.
I guess I have another thought, you know, as far as like trying to partner with folks. At one point, Dr. Scott with the U of A, and I don't think he's there anymore, but he had been doing nutrient additions to some of the smaller lakes there in Bella Vista. And that might give you a great opportunity to test different treatments, right? In different ponds that have received different levels of nutrient or whatever. I don't know what they've got going, or even it may have been discontinued at this point, but just an idea.
Yeah, definitely. And what's the name again?
It was Dr. Thad Scott. He's no longer there, but Dr. Haggard would know whoever's replaced him, I would think. And that may have been discontinued at this point. So
if I can follow up on that, just FYI, I was the person who contracted Thad Scott to do that work. I used to manage the lakes in Bella Vista. Right? There was some very interesting and some cutting edge work. Dr. Thad Scott is now at Baylor University, the major water quality lab there. It's easy to find, and some of the first publications from that work should be coming out soon. But it was all about nitrogen phosphorus ratio manipulation and the effects on the algal communities and primary and secondary production. So that's a good suggestion for a source for some information.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And any last questions for Amit?
Well, I certainly hope, Dr. Sinha, if we don't fund this, that you'll continue to pursue that, because if it produces a solution for the buffalo, I mean, we are all interested. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I very much appreciate your presentation today and your efforts and interest in the Buffalo River itself. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So at this point, we've heard all of the 5 presentations for funding, and so we'll open it up for just a broader funding discussion on how to move forward. I do just want to add, just to recap, there's about $167,421 remaining in the Buffalo River Conservation Committee funds. There's no mandate that all has to be allocated today, and there's also no mandate that we have to allocate any of it today. So if anyone feels like we need more time to think about the proposals, or if more information is needed on the proposals, we can certainly pause and come back and reconsider those later if we need to. But so again, just a couple considerations on that front. No mandate that we take action today or try to do the full allocation this afternoon. But we'll open it up for any comments or questions that anyone may have on moving forward with the funding.
I have one more question for the U.S. Geological Survey, please. So following the study, the 2 more years of study, I'm wondering about, will you all be able to, from the data that you gather, clearly identify the source of nutrients that are triggering the algae, or just the locations?
Well, we have other proposals going where that would help us do that if they were funded. We're trying to look at we would like to look at the amount of nutrients that are coming in from the gravel bars versus the springs. But there are additional methods that would need to be done to determine if, say, there was a human source or a poultry source, or what those sources might be. So this study's been sort of the pathway to try to determine where the nutrients are coming from. At that point, we could do dye tracing to see where they're coming from and to look at what those sources are. So the report would identify areas where the filamentous algae is the most problematic, and it looks like now we would be focusing on the nutrients that are related most to that to those blooms.
So are you suggesting you do source tracking? I know we've done a little bit of that when we were looking at nutrients and water quality in the past, but you would tie that data to this data potentially, or
well, this data could be tied to that. I mean, that would be a next step forward if we determine that springs are a problem or that gravel bars are a problem. Gravel bars could be, you think about all the folks that are on the gravel bars and using them, but nutrients, a large part of nutrients are transported during storm flow. They could come from, pastures or septic tanks or something that is off site. So once you determine where the primary source is, then to determine the source, we would need to do additional source tracking studies. We would use microbial methods and probably isotope methods to do that.
Hey, Billy, this is Tony. And if I understand correctly, and on your slides, looking at the math, y'all have spent right at $315,500 based upon your numbers on your slides, and that includes GS's input.
Yes, sir, that's close.
And you're looking at another 220,000 based upon this, and this is going to get us where the nutrients may or may not be coming from. Then we're looking at going further, have to go further to find out and do some type of either identification or source tracking or whatever to identify that. Then at that point, we could go back and potentially look at what we could or may be able to do to address it. Am I surmising that pretty close?
Yes, I mean, in order to get at the sources, I mean, you could, the first step, it's a process is to determine, where most of the nutrients are coming from. And I think that we've made a good headway in doing that. It's taken, again, it's not been something that we could do in 2 years just because of the hydrologic variability. It has taken a long time, and it's been at a cost of about $100,000 a year. But if that is occurring, if what seems to be occurring, and it's chronic, nutrients are coming, exposure is occurring through groundwater. And I don't think that's something that, we can choose to ignore without finding the potential sources of what that is. So it's a longer process than what, the average study that we do with our cooperators is.
Okay. And you're saying without this 132,000 influx, you don't know what a completion date would be on this? Because I noticed that on this, on the short version of what we've got here that Secretary Ward sent out, said your estimated completion date is September 30th of 2022. I'm assured that's probably with 132,000.
Yes, sir.
That if something happened, there was not that money or a lesser amount of money, would that date be extended, or are you looking to try to finish this project up by September of 22?
No, we don't have the option of, working forward without any funding. Data collection will stop, whatever money that we have remaining in the project, which is a very small amount, might be enough to do a sample or two, then data collection would stop.
Okay.
I have a quick question. So this is Ben Melbourne with Buffalo River Outfitters, for y'all that don't recognize my voice. The quick question I have for you is, how much input, how much have you tried to solicit funding from the Nature Conservancy, the Buffalo River Foundation, the Buffalo River Partners, and other nonprofit organizations that are working for the advancement of the Buffalo National River? Have you solicited funds from any of them up to this point?
We present, last year we presented on the Filamentous Algae Project, and in the last couple of years, several times. We presented to folks, that are in the audience, such as to groups like this, but I haven't been aware of any large pots of money that, could be available to the study. That doesn't mean they're not there, but to answer your question, I think the answer is no.
Okay. I didn't know if you'd reached out to any of the Nature Conservancy. I know a few people who are in that organization who do a lot of the similar things that you're talking about on other waterways. And I didn't know if they had funding that they'd be willing to contribute to the Buffalo National River. I know they spent a lot of money acquiring properties and things like that to protect some of those resources around the Buffalo. But I didn't know if they directly input any money in potentially solving some of the problems other than acquiring leases and things like that to benefit your project. It's just, I'm just looking for other revenue streams for you to get this done. I understand as a concessionaire how important it is and how big of an impact it has on the river. And it is definitely something that I think we need to move forward with, but I would also hate to burn our budget up and miss out on spreading out the funding that we can do across the board. So I'm for helping you get some funds. I just would like to see some other people putting some irons in the fire too, if that makes sense.
Well, with the Nature Conservancy, we've not reached out to them directly. I think they may be involved indirectly with the this committee, but I'm not, I haven't reached out to them directly. But thank you for your question and your comments.
Okay, well, any other comments or questions or thoughts on any of the proposals?
Yeah, Wes, I have a comment. We are directed to review the watershed management plan that was created by the BRAC. Am I remembering that right? Secretary Keogh. And refresh our memory on what our role here is actually. And in light of the fact that it's 2:30 and that we have a couple of proposals that I quite honestly, I would like some feedback from some key leaders within conservation and science to really understand how we can best spend this remaining money. I'd like to refresh myself on the management plan, kind of understand where we are really in our efforts in terms of improving the watershed and get some recommendations on what is our best way forward. So I would like to recommend that we table these proposals for now and reconvene and take them back up in 2 weeks.
I second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to table these for 2 weeks and come back and to have additional discussion and a decision on the funding proposals. As opposed for asking for ayes, I'll just ask if there's anybody opposed to doing that. Okay, well, we're hearing no objection. We'll plan to do that, and it's Thursday, so I know everybody needs to check their calendars and schedules to see what day works best, but we'll plan for about 2 weeks. It may be a little short, a little long, just depending on how schedules work out. But do appreciate that suggestion. Kind of as Secretary Keogh mentioned earlier, for some of this, that it may be an option that we can use some EPA multi-purpose grant for some funding, especially on the USGS proposal, and so just a little more homework that we can probably do on our end and for others, and soliciting feedback on what everybody thinks of the proposals as well. I do know that we've had a few that have had to leave because we've went a little bit long today, but I've had a couple people send me messages on how important the feral hog proposal is. And so I know that there's interest from others, and I do think it's important we take a minute to get some feedback from individuals and groups on what they think is most important, and to hear directly from those of the area as well. So any other thoughts or comments, either on the proposals or the BRCC efforts itself?
Yeah, I just was asking for, I guess, a point of clarity. So during the discussion about the Chamber of Commerce and trees, Scott had proposed, or different things were said. So it went from 5,000 to 2,500, and I'm just trying to figure out how's that changed at this point?
Yeah, and I will let Mike or Scott jump in here if they'd like, but the way I understood that proposal was the original proposal was for $5,000. Yeah. Our folks can work with them to really kind of reduce that to 2,500, but Scott has offered to match that 2,500, which would get them back to the original 5,000 total that they were asking for, but it would be 2,500 from the BRCC.
Gotcha. And that included 20 trees that were more mature, I believe, right?
Well, it as big a tree as you can get, for that price. And typically we can get about a 2 or 3 inch caliper tree, maybe $100 to $150 in that range. So I'll just kind of average it out $125, and we can get 20 trees. So with 5,000, we can get 40.
Okay.
And we can still pot and distribute a couple of hundred trees to homeowners. That was the other side of his thing, but we had already talked about that with him. So there's no cost to that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Secretary Ward.
Yes.
I would like to add one thing when I talked about 2 bathrooms. I know, as my mother would say, that's a drop in the bucket. I do know that Mark Faust and the Buffalo National River are working on wastewater treatment programs. We're doing the same thing here. And I could not find the research, but I have been told that it's there that having 1 million visitors to the Buffalo National River annually is the equivalent of having a small town of 29,000 people sitting on the banks of the Buffalo with no sewer system. I have not found that. I can't prove it. I will keep looking, but I'm hoping we can add something to stopping this at the source rather than having to deal with it after it's in the river. And I thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I see Mr. Scott Simon. Yes, sir.
Hey, Secretary Ward, I just wanted to make a support Secretary Kehoe's comment about the report. I think Assistant Secretary Cynthia Edwards wrote it, and just the work that everybody did, it just reads really, really well. It's got a ton of great information, and it's neat to have it all in one place. So I just wanted, and really a first for the Buffalo. So I just wanted to thank everybody for their work on that. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Well, appreciate your contributions to that report as well. Okay, any other items that we need to bring up today? One thing I will ask, just of the 5 presentations that were submitted today, what we did is, as we were seeking those applications, that was through an online submittal, online format for those to be submitted. So if you have additional information on those proposals or anything that you would like to be further distributed for people to look at, don't hesitate to send those to us, and we'll make sure that we get those out to everybody that they can look at prior to the next meeting. But don't have to, but if there's things that you want additional information or presentations that you'd like considered as part of the proposal, please send that to me, or Autumn Causey is the one who sent out the invitation, the calendar invitation. If you can send it to one of us, we'll make sure it gets distributed to everybody. But if no other comments, I know we've been going for a pretty good while today. I appreciate everybody's patience and endurance. I think we've covered a lot of really good information, and we will go ahead and adjourn, and we'll follow up with everybody soon about the next meeting. So thank you to everybody for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.